A baby built a time machine. Not a toy, not a drawing, an actual functioning time machine that bends the laws of physics. The same baby has built teleporters, weather control devices, mind control rays, and a return from the dead machine. So the question isn't whether Stewie Griffin is smart. The question is whether the word smart even applies to something operating this far beyond human limits. Today we're explaining just how intelligent Stewie really is, putting an actual number on it, and answering the deeper question hiding underneath. If Stewie is this much of a genius, why is his life such a disaster? Because that's the paradox at the heart of this character. Stewie has the intellect of the greatest minds in history multiplied many times over, and yet he spends most of his existence frustrated, lonely, and stuck. Understanding how that's possible reveals something profound about what intelligence actually is, and what it isn't. By the end, you'll have a real sense of Stewie's true IQ, and a much better understanding of why raw genius doesn't guarantee a good life. We're going to measure Stewie's intelligence across 3 dimensions, because IQ alone doesn't capture it. His technical genius, the building and inventing. His strategic genius, the planning and scheming. And his emotional intelligence, or rather, his catastrophic lack of it. The gap between those 3 is the whole story, and it explains everything about why this super genius is so miserable. Let's start with the technical genius, because it's the most jaw-dropping and the easiest to measure. Stewie operates at a level that doesn't just exceed human intelligence, it laps it. The greatest engineers and physicists in real history worked their entire lives to push the boundaries of what's possible, and they got nowhere near building a working time machine. Stewie did it as a toddler, in his bedroom, presumably between naps. If we're assigning a number, a normal genius sits around the upper end of the human scale. Stewie isn't on that scale at all. His technical ability would require an IQ so far beyond the measurable human range that any number we assign is really just a way of saying off the charts. We're talking about an intelligence that treats cutting-edge physics as a casual weekend hobby. And here's the first signpost. Stewie's technical genius is real, demonstrable, and unmistakable. There's no debate about whether he's brilliant in this dimension. The evidence is sitting right there in the form of impossible machines. Hold on to how complete and undeniable his technical genius is, because the contrast with his other dimensions is where this gets interesting and sad. Now let's look at the strategic genius, the planning mind. Stewie doesn't just build things, he schemes. He thinks several steps ahead, anticipates obstacles, and engineers elaborate plans with the sophistication of a master tactician. His plots, even the failed ones, reveal a mind that approaches problems with ruthless logic and creativity. He can model situations, predict behavior, and design intricate sequences of events to achieve his goals. This is a different kind of intelligence than the technical genius, and Stewie has it in abundance too. He's not just an inventor, he's a strategist, capable of the kind of multi-layered planning that defines history's great generals and chess masters. But here's where the first crack appears. Stewie's plans, for all their brilliance, fail constantly. And they don't usually fail because of a flaw in the logic. They fail because of a flaw in Stewie. He gets distracted. He gets emotional. He underestimates the very people he's scheming against because he can't comprehend their motivations. The strategic genius is real, but it keeps getting sabotaged by something Stewie doesn't have. And that something is the 3rd dimension, the one where his genius completely collapses. Here's the plan for the end. The reason a being this intelligent fails so often, and lives so unhappily, isn't a gap in his brain power. It's a gap in something else entirely, a kind of intelligence that has nothing to do with IQ. We're going to name it and explain why it matters more than all the technical brilliance in the world. Keep that in mind as we look at the dimension where Stewie is, shockingly, almost completely incompetent. Let's talk about emotional intelligence, and here the super genius becomes a fool. For all his ability to build impossible machines and devise elaborate schemes, Stewie is catastrophically bad at understanding emotions, relationships, and himself. He can't read why people do what they do when their reasons are emotional rather than logical. He misjudges his own feelings constantly, mistaking love for hatred, need for contempt, loneliness for ambition. He pushes away the very connection he desperately craves. He can model the trajectory of a spacecraft, but can't model the simple emotional needs of the people right in front of him, including his own. This is the great irony of Stewie Griffin. The smartest being in the show is emotionally about as developed as, well, an actual baby. And that makes a tragic kind of sense, because that's exactly what he is. His brain raced light years ahead in technical and strategic ability, while his emotional development stayed stuck at the level of his physical age. He's a one-year-old's heart wired to a supercomputer's mind, and the mismatch is the source of all his suffering. He has the tools to conquer the world and not the first clue how to make a friend, which is why conquering the world never actually makes him happy. And that's the payoff to everything we planted. Remember how complete his technical genius was, and how it kept getting sabotaged? Here's the resolution. Intelligence isn't one thing. It's many different capacities, and they don't have to develop together. You can have a mind that builds time machines, and a heart that can't navigate a simple conversation. Stewie's misery doesn't come from any lack of brilliance. It comes from the enormous gap between his cognitive genius and his emotional poverty. All the IQ in the universe can't fill the specific hole that only emotional intelligence can fill. And Stewie's tragedy is that he's smart enough to sense the hole, but not wise enough to know how to close it. So if we have to put numbers on it, here's the honest answer. Stewie's technical and strategic IQ is, functionally, immeasurable, far beyond any human scale, easily the highest of any character in the show, and arguably in all of fiction. But his emotional intelligence sits down at the level of the infant he physically is. He's simultaneously the smartest and the most emotionally stunted character in Quahog, and those two facts are not a contradiction. They're the same fact, viewed from two sides. The genius and the loneliness are produced by the exact same imbalance. Let me put Stewie's intelligence in real context, because comparing him to actual measures of genius is the only way to grasp how absurd his abilities are. Consider what real-world genius looks like. The most brilliant scientists in history, the ones whose names define entire fields, worked in teams, across decades, building on centuries of accumulated knowledge, with the most advanced equipment available, to make incremental progress at the edge of what's possible. The theoretical frameworks behind time travel remain, in the real world, almost entirely unsolved, the stuff of speculation and equations that may never be realized. And Stewie built a working one alone, as a baby, without formal education, apparently from spare parts. There is no human IQ score that captures this. The scale we use to measure intelligence simply wasn't designed for a mind that treats the impossible as a Tuesday afternoon project. But here's what makes Stewie's intelligence even stranger. It's not just raw processing power, it's creativity combined with capability. Plenty of fictional geniuses are smart in a cold, calculating way. Stewie is smart and inventive and playful with his intelligence. He doesn't just solve problems, he dreams up entirely new possibilities, approaches challenges from angles no one else would consider, and executes them with flawless technical skill. That combination, the imaginative leap plus the engineering ability to actually build the dream, is what separates true genius from mere intelligence, and Stewie has both in quantities that dwarf any real human who has ever lived. And yet, here's the detail that keeps it from being a simple power fantasy. All of that staggering ability is housed in a being who cannot tie his own shoes, who depends entirely on others for his most basic needs, who is physically helpless in almost every way that matters day to day. The greatest mind in the show can't reach the kitchen counter. He can bend space and time but can't open a door without help. That contrast isn't just funny, it's the entire thesis of the character. Stewie embodies the gap between capability and power, between what a mind can imagine and what a body can do. And that gap is a constant, humbling reminder that intelligence alone doesn't make you free. The most poignant version of this is in his relationships. Stewie can model the behavior of subatomic particles, but consistently fails to understand the people closest to him. He can predict the trajectory of a rocket, but not the reaction of his own best friend. He builds machines to solve every problem except the ones that actually torment him. His loneliness, his need for connection, his desire to be understood. Because those problems can't be solved with engineering. No invention can make someone love you. No machine can manufacture genuine connection. And so the smartest being in the show keeps reaching for tools to fix a hole that no tool can reach, which is the most human mistake of all, dressed up in the most superhuman package imaginable. So here's the bigger idea this teaches you, about Stewie and about intelligence in general. We tend to worship raw brain power, to assume that being smart enough will solve everything. Stewie is the perfect refutation of that idea. He's proof that you can be a genius and still get everything that actually matters wrong, that intelligence and wisdom are not the same thing, and that the ability to understand people and yourself is worth more than the ability to bend physics. A being who can do anything except understand his own heart is not a success story. He's a warning. There's a final comparison that puts Stewie's intelligence in perspective, and it's with the other so-called smart character in the show, Brian. Brian thinks he's brilliant. He reads, he quotes, he postures as an intellectual. But Brian's intelligence is performative, all surface, a costume he wears to feel superior. Stewie's intelligence is the real thing, demonstrated through actual creation rather than name-dropping. And the contrast between them is one of the show's sharpest observations about intelligence, that the loudest person in the room about their own smarts is usually the least secure in it, while genuine genius often doesn't need to announce itself at all. Stewie rarely brags about being smart. He just builds a time machine and moves on. Brian, who couldn't build a paper airplane, never stops talking about his own mind. That contrast also explains why they work so well as friends. Stewie has the raw intelligence Brian pretends to have, and Brian has the emotional fluency, however flawed, that Stewie completely lacks. Together they almost form one complete person, the genius mind and the feeling heart, which is exactly why their relationship became the emotional core of the show. Each one supplies what the other is missing. Stewie gives Brian someone who's actually his intellectual equal, and Brian gives Stewie his first real experience of being understood. The smartest character and the character who thinks he's smartest found in each other the one thing neither could build or fake alone, a genuine connection. And maybe that's the real answer to how smart Stewie is. Smart enough to do anything except the one thing he most needs, and just barely lucky enough to stumble into a friendship that does it for him. His IQ is off the charts. His wisdom arrives slowly, painfully, and only through the messy, illogical, unmeasurable process of actually caring about someone else. The machines were always the easy part. The friendship was the hard part, and it's the only part that ever made him less miserable. So next time you watch Stewie pull off something brilliant, watch what happens right after. Watch how the genius who just defied the laws of nature fumbles the simplest human moments seconds later. That gap between what he can build and what he can feel is the truest measure of who he is. The time machine is impressive. The fact that he's still lonely with a time machine is the point. A being who can travel through all of time and space and still can't find his way to feeling understood is the loneliest genius ever put on a screen, and the size of his intellect only makes the size of that loneliness clearer. The smartest mind in the room is, in the end, just a little boy who wants someone to truly see him, and no equation will ever solve that. So what do you think Stewie's real IQ is, if you had to put a number on it? And do you think he'll ever close the emotional gap? Or is he doomed to be brilliant and unhappy forever? Tell me in the comments. I'm genuinely curious where you land. If this made you see the smartest baby in television in a whole new way, hit that like button and share it with the friend who always says they wish they were a genius. And stick around, because intelligence runs in this family in the strangest ways. Next, we're digging into the dark backstory behind every single Griffin family member.